At this very moment, millions of Americans believe they're standing on the edge of the greatest inheritance boom in history. What they don't see is that the money they're waiting for is already being redirected, quietly, legally, and mathematically, away from them. Right now, as you're watching this, nearly 50 million American families believe a life-changing inheritance is coming their way. They believe that decades of hard work by previous generations are about to pay off, that the system is finally going to reward patience, that wealth is about to move downward into their hands. But this belief is built on a misunderstanding so large that, by the time most people realize it, the outcome will already be locked in. The number everyone is talking about is enormous $124 trillion. According to a 2024 analysis by Cerulli Associates, that is the total amount of wealth expected to change ownership in the United States by 2048. Financial media has framed this as the greatest wealth transfer in American history. It sounds optimistic. It sounds democratic. It sounds like opportunity. But that framing is dangerously inaccurate. What's unfolding is not a transfer in the traditional sense. It's a consolidation. Wealth is not flowing outward to the many. It is being pulled inward toward the few. This process is not driven by emotion, politics, or conspiracy. It is driven by arithmetic, and it follows a pattern so old, so consistent, that it has already played out across thousands of years and multiple civilizations. You are not watching wealth move. You are watching it concentrate. Every major society that has relied on currency expansion to sustain itself has followed the same four-stage trajectory. Each stage feels manageable on its own. Each stage is rationalized at the time. But together, they form a machine that systematically dismantles the middle class. The first stage is trust. A nation establishes a currency backed by something real, gold, silver, or another scarce resource. This backing creates confidence. People save without fear. Trade expands. Investment grows. Economic activity accelerates. The system feels stable, reliable, permanent. Most people believe it will last indefinitely. The second stage begins quietly. Government expenses rise, wars are fought. Social obligations grow. Infrastructure expands. Instead of making painful choices, raising taxes or reducing spending, leaders choose a less visible option. The currency is slowly diluted. Precious metal content is reduced. Paper supply increases. New money enters circulation. Officials insist nothing has changed because technically nothing has yet. The third stage is where damage becomes unavoidable. Inflation accelerates. Prices rise faster than wages. Purchasing power erodes. Savings lose value year after year. The middle class, which stores wealth primarily in currency and fixed income instruments, absorbs the shock. Meanwhile, those closest to asset ownership, landowners, corporations, financial institutions, and political insiders are insulated. They consolidate. The fourth stage is the reset. A new monetary system emerges. Sometimes it's a new currency. Sometimes it's a structural reorganization. By the time it arrives, the wealth has already moved. What once belonged to millions now belongs to a small minority. The system restarts, and history moves on. This is not theory, it is documented history. Take ancient Rome. Under Augustus, the Roman denarius was nearly pure silver and widely trusted. It powered trade across the empire. But in 64 AD, following massive fires and growing military costs, Emperor Nero needed money. Rather than raise taxes directly, he reduced the silver content of the coin. The denarius dropped from about 95% silver to roughly 80%. It seemed minor at the time. Over the next century, debasement accelerated. Under Septimius Severus, silver content fell below 50%. In 215 AD, Emperor Caracalla introduced a new coin, the Antoninianus, marketed as being worth 2 denarii, while containing far less silver than promised. It was monetary deception on a civilizational scale. By the mid-3rd century, silver content collapsed into single digits. Inflation exploded. Prices surged by multiples. Small landowners lost everything. Savings became worthless. Those who held land and physical assets survived and expanded their control. Rome's middle class was effectively erased. The empire never recovered its economic foundation. Now fast forward nearly 2,000 years to Weimar Germany. After World War I, Germany was burdened with massive reparations payable in gold-backed currency. Having abandoned the gold standard during the war, the country lacked the reserves required to pay. The government faced a choice: impose crushing taxes or print money. It chose to print. At first, the effects were gradual. Then they became exponential. Exchange rates collapsed. In early 1923, foreign occupation of the Ruhr triggered nationwide strikes, which the government funded with newly printed marks. By November of that year, a single U.S. dollar was worth trillions of marks. Bread prices changed hourly. Families who had saved responsibly for decades were wiped out in months. Anyone holding cash was destroyed. Anyone holding land, gold, or foreign assets survived. Wealth moved upward violently and permanently. The pattern held again. Then comes the example most Americans recognize but rarely analyze properly: August 15, 1971. That evening, President Richard Nixon announced the suspension of the dollar's convertibility into gold. Since 1944, under Bretton Woods, the dollar had been tied to gold at a fixed price, anchoring the global financial system. But decades of deficit spending and war financing drained U.S. gold reserves. Foreign governments began demanding redemption. When the U.S. could no longer meet those demands, the gold window closed. The dollar became a pure fiat currency overnight. What followed was not immediate collapse, but slow erosion. Inflation surged throughout the 1970s. Real wages stagnated. Purchasing power declined year after year. Those holding cash watched their savings weaken. Those holding assets, real estate, stocks, commodities, benefited enormously. Wealth inequality widened structurally. Once again, trust, debasement, loss of control, consolidation. Which brings us to the present. As of 2024, total U.S. household wealth stands near $163 trillion, the highest figure ever recorded. But that number is misleading. The top 1% of Americans control over 30% of that wealth. The bottom half controls less than 3%. Of the projected $124 trillion transfer, more than half originates from the wealthiest 2% of households, and much of it is structured to remain within elite circles through trusts, tax planning, and asset ownership. Millennials and Gen Z are told to expect trillions, yet surveys show only a small fraction of Americans actually plan to leave meaningful inheritances. The expectation gap is massive. Millions are planning their futures around money that statistically does not exist. Meanwhile, the system continues operating exactly as designed. The money supply expands. Debt climbs beyond historical limits. Asset prices inflate. Wages lag. Housing becomes unaffordable. The middle class is hollowed out, not suddenly but steadily. This is not a failure of policy. It is the mathematical outcome of fiat currency expansion. Currency debasement always punishes savers and rewards asset holders. There are no exceptions. Technology does not stop it. Innovation does not reverse it. Exceptionalism does not override it. If your wealth is stored primarily in cash, savings accounts, or fixed income instruments, you are positioned exactly where every historical cycle inflicts maximum damage. Inflation silently extracts value and reallocates it upward. The so-called wealth transfer is not flowing toward you. It is flowing past you. The uncomfortable truth is this: most people are not inheriting wealth. They are funding someone else's inheritance. The only defense is understanding the pattern before it completes. Stop waiting for money that statistics say is unlikely to arrive. Recognize that currency is not a long-term store of value. Position yourself on the side of assets that benefit from debasement rather than suffer from it. This cycle has repeated for more than 2,000 years. It is repeating again now. And the final stage does not announce itself, it simply arrives. This is not financial advice. It is pattern recognition. And the pattern has never failed.